Merci beaucoup d'être revenu aujourd'hui. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your presence here today. Before I begin, let me just say that thank you very much. I'm being heckled here by. Thank you very much for your congratulations. Thank you very much for your questions. I'm going to begin my remarks now. Justin Trudeau is out of touch, and Canadians are out of money. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary deficits have bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest that Canadians pay. And that is why we are experiencing 40-year highs in inflation today. Furthermore, inflationary deficits are also the inflationary taxes that are driving up the cost for workers and businesses to produce the goods that we buy. On top of that, Trudeau proposes yet more spending to bid up costs even further. The more he spends, the more things cost. It is just inflation. And here we are today with 40-year highs in inflation, where Canadians are spending more just to feed themselves, to heat their homes, and to buy a home in the very first place. The reason that, look, yeah. So I mean, we have basically a liberal heckler who snuck in here today to, well, apparently, right. Are you going to let me make my misstatement?
From the guy who actually reported first on the Prime Minister breaking the law.
Yeah. Are you going to let me make my statement?
Ask a question. Say yes.
I've actually never seen you heckling the Prime Minister.
Before. Ask Minister
never seen you heckling the Prime Minister. Look, bottom line is this.
You're going to take some questions at the end of the statement.
Yes, I will be taking 2 questions at the very end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to start my statement again, and hopefully this time without interruption from the Liberal heckling gathering here, and we'll speak directly to Canadians so that they can hear what the new Leader of the Opposition has to say. I'll begin again. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. The more Trudeau spends, the more things cost. $500 billion of inflationary deficits mean more dollars bidding up the cost of the things we buy and the interest we pay. On top of that, inflationary taxes have inflated the cost of businesses and workers to produce those very same goods. The more Trudeau spends, the more things cost. Now, this is not about an accounting ledger. It is about real pain for real people. With food prices up 10% year over year, 4 in 5 Canadians are forced to cut back on their diets. We have 30-year-olds living in their parents' basements or trapped in tiny apartments from which they cannot escape. We have seniors who watch their savings evaporate because the cost of heat and other essentials has risen out of reach. Now, I thought Justin Trudeau might have learned the lesson from the fact that I won the leadership. He suddenly took an interest in inflation. After 2 years of my warning him that his inflationary money-printing deficits would cause this problem, he finally admitted that there is a problem. And he announced he would hold a press conference today, one day after I issued a challenge to him. And the challenge was this, that he promised to all Canadians that there would be no new tax increases on seniors and workers. But today, he failed to make that commitment. And so Conservatives are putting him on notice that we will oppose any attempts by his government to raise taxes on working people or seniors in this country. Right now, he has scheduled tax increases on people's paychecks and on their heat, gas, and groceries. Canadians cannot afford these tax increases, and they come at exactly the worst time. And that is why Conservatives will lead the charge against them. We have also made other practical solutions. Cap government spending and cut government waste. so that we can bring down the inflationary deficits and taxes that have caused the problems in the first place. Eliminate the carbon tax to bring down gas and grocery bills and to bring a net savings to families who are paying more under the tax than they get back under the rebates. Cancel the increases to payroll taxes. And incentivize municipalities to speed up and lower the cost of building permits so we can get millions of new houses. Those are practical solutions that would lower the cost and make it possible for seniors to buy a good life with their savings and workers to buy a good life with their paychecks. Unfortunately, today, we saw none of those practical solutions. In fact, we saw more inflationary spending that will fail to solve the problem for everyday Canadians. You see, the problem with spending more money as a solution to inflation is that it simply pours more gasoline on the inflationary fire. And that is exactly what Justin Trudeau continues to do. I'll give you an example. He says he's going to give people $500 to help with the rent. Well, that works out to $40 a month. In Toronto, that will not even buy you 1 day's rent for your $2,300 a month average rental cost for your apartment. So 1 day's rent and your money's gone, and you have to find another $2,000. And certainly won't make you any better able to buy a house, with the average house in Vancouver being over $1 million. $500 is not even a drop in the bucket. We need to actually counter the inflation, the Justinflation that this government has caused, rather than trying to spend more money to make the problem worse. So once again, Conservatives will fight tooth and nail against the inflationary taxes that the Trudeau government is putting forward, and in favor of bringing inflation down so that paychecks go further.
Merci beaucoup d'être venu aujourd'hui. Le coût du gouvernement augmente le coût de la vie. 500 milliards de dollars d'augmentation de notre dette ajoute à l'inflation et au taux d'intérêt que nous payons. Les taxes inflationnistes qu'impose Justin Trudeau augmentent aussi le coût de produire des biens et services que nous achetons. Plus que Justin Trudeau dépense, plus que ça coûte cher aux Canadiens. C'est la juste inflation. J'ai averti il y a 2 ans qu'il allait y avoir cette inflation si on continuait d'imprimer l'argent pour financer les déficits inflationnistes de Justin Trudeau. Mais il m'a ignoré. Et pendant 2 ans, j'ai continué d'en parler. Hier, j'ai appris qu'il allait faire une annonce. Et j'ai pensé peut-être, heureusement, il allait changer de direction. Je lui ai lancé un défi, qu'il se consacre de ne pas augmenter les taxes ni les impôts sur le dos de nos aînés et nos travailleurs. Aujourd'hui, il n'a pas répondu à ce défi. Donc, on va continuer de le faire. Les conservateurs ne vont pas arrêter leur travail pour empêcher ces augmentations de taxes et d'impôts. Nos aînés, nos travailleurs, nos familles ne peuvent plus payer ces genres de coûts. Nous avons offert d'autres solutions. Nous avons dit que le gouvernement devrait limiter les dépenses et couper le gaspillage pour réduire les déficits et les taxes inflationnistes. Qu'il devrait inciter les municipalités de permettre davantage de construction des maisons. Et qu'il devrait geler les taxes au lieu de les augmenter. Celles sont des priorités des conservateurs. Nous allons travailler fort pour les avancer, parce que maintenant, les Canadiens ne peuvent plus payer les factures pour un gouvernement qui devient de plus en plus coûteux.
Yeah. One, if I could get your thoughts on Alain Raiss, but the second is, how is it not fair game for the federal government to spend taxpayers' money on helping low-income people today, this minute, afford some of the essentials of everyday life? But on Alain Raiss as well, please, Mr. Poilievre.
All of that is fine. The problem is that the money will be vaporized by inflation. As I said earlier, $500 in housing assistance for an entire year, when the average rent is over $2,000 in many of our big cities per month, that money will go up in smoke for the average family. What we need are more apartments for people to live in, more houses for them to buy, and lower taxes so that their paychecks go further. And that is what Conservatives are fighting for, and that is why we have said we will oppose any tax increases. Now, I would note that one of the tax increases that Mr. Trudeau promises hits the working poor the hardest. He wants to raise payroll taxes. There is no personal exemption on those. That means that from the very first dollar a worker begins earning, they start paying that tax. And so in percentage terms, payroll tax hikes are the hardest on the poorest people. So that is why Conservatives will fight tooth and nail against any tax increase. Our working poor need the chance to keep their paychecks so that they can pay their bills, and that is why Conservatives believe in low taxes. Oui, merci.
Est-ce que vous avez un message pour M. Reyes qui a quitté, qui trouve qu'il n'y a plus sa place au sein d'un parti conservateur que vous dirigez? Qu'avez-vous à dire à ces gens-là et à M. Reyes en particulier?
Mais il a décidé de ne pas combattre l'inflation de Justin Trudeau. Nous travaillons pour combattre les déficits et les taxes inflationnistes qu'impose Justin Trudeau. Les citoyens du comté d'Alain Reyes sont d'accord. Ils ont voté pour moi dans la course à la chefferie. Et je pense que tous les conservateurs qui restent sont de la même avis. Il faut contrer l'inflation de Justin Trudeau parce que les Canadiens ne peuvent plus payer les factures. Merci beaucoup.
En même temps, monsieur, pourquoi juste deux questions? Pourquoi juste deux questions?